Prime Minister is in France for a two-day visit. Prime Minister Modi has a packed schedule during the visit, which marks a celebration of 25 years of the India-France strategic partnership. Prime Minister Modi is on his sixth visit to France on the invitation of French President Emmanuel Macron. He was received by French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne at the airport. On arrival, he received a ceremonial welcome accompanied with a guard of honor. He greeted the members of the Indian community who had gathered outside his hotel. Later today, he's scheduled to meet with the president of the French Senate, Gerard Larcher, and Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne. He will also address members of the Indian community at the iconic La Scène Musicale. This will be followed by a banquet and private dinner hosted by President Emmanuel Macron in the honor of the Indian Prime Minister. Over 250 dignitaries are expected to attend the event. The two leaders will also take a guided tour of the iconic Louvre Museum. They will then witness a firework display over the Eiffel Tower. On July 14th, he will participate in the annual Bastille Day parade as the guest of honor. This year, Indian Air Force's Rafales and a 77 personnel strong contingent will participate in the Bastille Day celebrations. Defense cooperation is set to be a big focus of this visit. France and India are expected to ink defense deals worth over $13.3 billion. This includes the purchase of 26 Rafale marine fighter aircrafts and 3 Scorpion-class submarines for the Indian Navy. The visit will certainly provide the leaders with an opportunity to chart out a course for future partnership. Okay, for more on this, we are being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhan Sabal, who is in Paris. Siddhan, great to see you. So this seems like a jam-packed visit by the Indian Prime Minister to France. After what we said in the introduction, what else can you tell us about the mood on the ground right now?
Well, the mood on the ground is ecstatic, to use the phrase or to use the word. I'm standing just in front of the Indian Prime Minister's hotel, and many members of the Indian diaspora were waiting here a short while ago, getting a glimpse or hoping to get a glimpse of the Indian Prime Minister. Today, the focus remains on two things. First, of course, the diaspora event where the Indian Prime Minister will be addressing. Now, we know, and as we have seen, whether it's in New York, Washington, or here in Paris, meeting with the diaspora has been a permanent fixture of Indian Prime Minister's travel abroad. And this is no different here in Paris as well. And as he addresses the diaspora in a few hours from now here in Paris, his focus will be as to the role the Indian government has done in terms of improving the situation of average Indians, and also how the Indian foreign policy has been much more proactive. He also meets the French President Emmanuel Macron as well, and both leaders, of course, share a lot of positive vibes and have been holding conversations on a regular basis. Their last in-person meeting was in Hiroshima just a few months ago, and we know that defense tops the key focus during this visit, whether it's at the Bastille Day, where, of course, the Indian Prime Minister will be the chief guest, but also we will see the marching contingent of the Indian Armed Forces, the Rafale fighter jets doing the flypast, and of course INS Chennai docking in one of the French ports, but also announcements on defense ties. We know that earlier in the day from Delhi came the announcement of India now indicating that it will be procuring Rafale, and that is the marine variant of Rafale fighter jet. And defense is a relationship that has been growing leaps and bounds, whether it's the Scorpion deal in 2006 or the Rafale fighter jets, and now Rafale fighter jets, the marine variant being procured, the indication being given. So that remains the key outcome, but also on civil nuclear energy, on education, on climate change, where both countries have essentially made sure that a new organization is formed, that is the International Solar Alliance.
Okay, Siddhan, thank you so much for that. Stay with us. We are also joined by Elisabeth Monte from Paris. She's a journalist and a columnist at the London Telegraph. Thank you so much for joining us on WION. What is the significance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to France from a French perspective?
from a French perspective, France likes very much the idea that India seems to boost the whole notion of strategic autonomy that President Macron has been defending recently in a very sort of, old French tradition going back to General de Gaulle of standing in the middle in a multi-polar world rather than just on one side. So he likes that. He also likes the position of India in the Indo-Pacific, because France is creating her own alliance in the Indo-Pacific. You know that French sales of submarines were brutally interrupted by the Australian Prime Minister. But with India, with South Korea, with Japan, with other friendly countries, France, who is herself present in various places in the Pacific and in the Indian Sea, likes very much having a relationship with India. And finally, and possibly not least, India has purchased Rafale fighters for quite some time, French plane makers Dassault, and that opened the gate to other countries to see that, after all, this is a good plane and will buy some. So all of this means that he's a great favorite with President Macron.
Sidan, back to you. France has been one of India's closest partners in Europe for decades. Just going back, Paris was probably the only Western capital not to impose sanctions on New Delhi after India conducted nuclear tests back in 1998. And it seems that these relationships have only grown, at least strategically, for a variety of reasons. Can you tell us about that?
And yes, Susan, you have rightly pointed out to that, and it is getting the dividends of that. The defense relationship surely is growing. But as many say that France is the new best friend of India, has been replacing Russia as well. It has been engaging with India on defense. It is providing that crucial veto at the United Nations Security Council, just in case the Pakistanis and the Chinese come together to raise some issue that irks India. So France has been doing that, and this relationship has been without any major irritant. It has been growing. It has all the positive vibes, and now the French president inviting the Indian Prime Minister for the Bastille Day. This is an honor that is rarely given to a foreign leader. Usually there is no guest, and now, of course, the Indian Prime Minister has been invited. And there is a historical backdrop of all entire engagement on defense as well. Essentially, we saw how the Indian troops played a key role during World War I in terms of fighting. And of course, there are memorials here where the Indian Prime Minister visited way back in 2015. We do expect more engagement, perhaps a visit by President Macron as well, which is much due given that last time President Macron came to India was in 2018. But Indian Prime Minister has been regular to the French capital. The last time he visited was just last year during his 3-country tour to Denmark, Germany and France. So the high-level engagement, the engagement on defense, civil nuclear energy, France keen to get more Indian students, shows that how there is an outreach by both sides, by both New Delhi and by Paris, at a time when the world is witnessing a lot of changes, especially a rise of very aggressive China.
Diplomatic correspondent joining us from Paris, and also Elisabeth from Paris as well, journalist and columnist at the London Telegraph. Both of you, thank you so much for that. And Sidan, of course, we'll be speaking to you a lot more throughout the bulletin and the day for updates.